Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Paul Williamson, and I am the chair of the Marcomms group within the PRCA. Delighted to welcome so many of you to this event this afternoon. Just wanted to give you a bit of background as to the sort of vision and mission of this group. And then I'll hand over to Kat, who's going to moderate the event for us today. We were keen when we started the Marcomms group last year that we aligned our sort of vision and mission to that of the PRCA, and really that is to raise standards within our industry with the end goal to always deliver better outcomes for our stakeholders, both internal and external. And the way that we plan to do that is by creating value for both agency and client-side colleagues by creating a platform for knowledge sharing and best practice. For those of you that participated in the first event, we very much welcomed groups, both senior people and junior people from client side and from agency side, to talk about the ways in which we can demonstrate our value to our board members so that we continue to add value throughout everything that we do. That syncs really well into the discussion we're going to have today, which is about what do we measure and how do we measure? And we, again, are really fortunate to have a stellar lineup of speakers for you today. I'll do some thank yous at the end, but for now, I can keep quiet and I'll hand you over to Kat, who is the vice chair of the group and will moderate today's session.
Good afternoon. Thanks for that, Paul. So as Paul's just said, our aim is very much to kind of encourage healthy discussion and debate. So the theme of measurement today, which has proven so popular for you all to attend, it's a natural progression from the last event. In fact, the first event that the PRCA Marcomms Council held, which was all about demonstrating value back to the board. Obviously, that was a very pertinent issue given the challenging times we all face. And it's very important to us at the moment that we reflect the fact that we all have to be staying so agile at the moment to finding new ways to demonstrate value, both back to the brands that we work for if you're on the agency side, or the customers that you're engaging with if you're on the brand side as well, and just making sure that we are constantly assessing every tool that is at our disposal. So without further ado, we've got a packed schedule today. So you will be hearing from Fernando Angulo, who is from online visibility management platform SEMrush. So they will be discussing just some key shifts that they are seeing so far in online measurements and things that that you may or may not be aware of, and also some things that are going to be influencing how we measure success for clients and for brands moving forward. And then we'll hear from Chelsey Gibbons of Saga, who's discussing her in-house cross-channel management experience with some live examples for us. Then we'll have a short break in case you want to ask any questions before hearing from Jess Hargreaves, who is MD of Pretty Green, on her experiences both setting new measurement frameworks for experiential industry-wide and how that translates into PR specifically, and any kind of parallels that we see there. And then hearing finally from Jess Levy, who is VP of Marketing for EU at Shark Ninja, fresh from a very successful, I believe, Amazon Prime Day, on customer engagement and how that's used as a fulcrum within that business for measuring regular measure assessment for clients. So if I can just ask, you've got a chat function at the bottom. Please do share any and all questions. I will be managing a panel debate at the end, so don't feel like you have to wait. Without further ado, here's Fernando.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you for having me here today. Let's start with this session. I want to share a couple of new thoughts on how should we measure effectiveness. For doing that, let me say a couple of words about SEMrush, who we are. We are based in Boston, where are our headquarters, but we have different offices all over the world. And about 2 months ago, we had 6 million users in our platform. I've been working for this company the last 9 years, and we saw very different ways to measure marketing. We were testing as well, but we thought that it will be interesting to see how things are changing in the way that we as companies, our corporations, brands are changing and not only the way that we are doing marketing, but also in the way we are thinking. As you can see here, this is just a small explanation of what is happening today at the beginning in the industrial era, then the age of distribution, then information age. But today, since the beginning of the pandemics, we saw that the user of era has definitely started, because we have empowered users that are demanding a new level of obsessive attention. You can have whatever you want, whatever you want at the exact moment that you want. If you want to try the new iPhone, for example, you can just pre-order it and have it in a couple of weeks. If you want to try, for example, you're in Australia and you want to try Vietnamese food, you can order it at 3 a.m. These kind of search queries were not happening in 2005, in 1995, for example. Right now we have different approaches from users, and that's the thing that is changing the way we are measuring things. The user-centric era is changing everything today. So what people from big corporations are doing right now when they are gathering, when they're having several meetings, so they are talking about information that they can gather from users to have more enriched data, so they can see the behavior that users are having when they are doing their search queries. They are talking about the price that they can offer to be more competitive. And they're also looking for the places where they can attract more users in order to offer them their services, their products. And also, they are talking a lot with their analytical teams on the ways to measure results, measure all the KPIs around the user. So we are in a user-centric era. So we need to think about how we can measure the success of our strategies through this user-centric concept. That's why we need to see how brands are changing the way they measure their results. And I want to give you a few examples on what is happening the last couple of years. Actually, I have data only from last year, because it was a big scandal in the digital industry, with different companies that they were offering anonymous data. You know about the Cambridge analytical situation with Facebook. It was another one, the jump shot case, for example. They were telling us, by jump shot, the last one, that every website will lose traffic, but SEO, so search engine optimization, will remain important. Why is that? Why these companies, big analytical companies, are telling us that every website is going to lose, is going to be losing traffic? Because this is something that is already happening today. Actually, it was happening 2 years ago. This year, more than ever, companies are losing traffic. And some of the marketing directors are just asking, what can I do next? What do I need to do in order to change all the situation? This is not a bad situation overall, because as you can see here from this graph, the latest information that we have from what is happening inside of this search results page, you can see that 56% of the people are not clicking on any result. So they have their search query. You can search for something, and you will not be doing any clicks. So from 10 people, 5.6 are not clicking on any result. That's the reason, that's the main reason a lot of websites are losing traffic, but those zero-click searches are really good for brand impact. You can see 39% of the people are clicking on the organic results, so that's the first position, second position, third position, or wherever, and only 4% of the people are clicking on ads. Ads still are working very well, but something is changing there as well. So we need to be focusing on this black hole area with the zero-click results. Why is that? Because this amount of zero clicks is increasing a lot every single year. Why is that? Because of these guys called featured snippets. You can see here, this is a bank in the United States. They switch off the way they're measuring their results. Their main measurement plan was to track traffic from different sources, but I say, okay, we cannot track, we don't want to track any more traffic because we want to see what is happening with our brand. Are we solving people's problems? Are we giving them all the answers to their questions? So they were increasing since the beginning of 2019 the way they were working with content, and they were measuring. So as you can see here, every single month they increase the amount of feature snippets. So what is a feature snippet? You can ask. Is that big result that you receive when you use Google, for example, asking any question? Right now, the amount of questions that are giving us a feature snippet are around 89%. So for every single question that a person can have, Google is going to be giving you or a feature snippet or any other search feature that belongs to them. So for these feature snippets, the amount of non-clicks is really huge. Another example, as you can see here, is another fintech company based in India. So they're Bank Bazaar, and the amount of feature snippet that they are having today is really big. It's 12,000 feature snippets. So for any search query like how to open a bank account, how to transfer my money from one bank to another, how to wire money from one account. So all the questions related to fintech or to a classical bank they have already a feature snippet, a big box with a paragraph, with the list, or with a table. There are three types of feature snippet, which are incredibly big and useful for users. So the brand impact is measured by how these results can affect the brand perception when people they feel that relief when they have the answer to their question. So you are completing the whole circle. The user has a need, and you have this feature snippet that is telling all that the user needs to know. But something interesting really happened when I figured it out. I remember it was last year when I asked someone from the New York Times, actually was an SEO guy that works there. They were telling me, hey, we are also working with feature snippets. And the amount of feature snippet that they have in the US is around 35,000 feature snippets. So they are working a lot with this because in order to have a feature snippet, you need to work with the appropriate format. You need to have different hierarchy of the content, the structure of the content. Also, you need to have rankings for them, links, and so on. So it's in a way very technical, but it's very easy to earn them. But you need to put some effort in order to earn them from Google. So the New York Times working into brand impact as well, solving people's questions. The elections day, talking about social and demographic needs that people can have. So the amount of brand search features that they have here, as you can see here, they have local paths, site links. But I also was noticing that there is another type of result that are called people also asks. As you can see here in the small screenshot, the amount of people also ask results is also really huge. It's around 122,000 of results. That means that they are populating the SERP, the first page of results, with feature snippets, and people also ask results. But why they are doing that? Brand impact, of course, is really great, but there are also another things that are happening out there. So we held research based on voice assistants a couple of years ago. This year, we researched it again. What is the situation? Trying to understand what is the source of information from voice assistants with Google devices, with Alexa, with Siri, and different ones. And we saw, for example, for Google devices, 80% of all answers from voice assistants are coming from search features, from those results. And also, 70% of all answers are coming from feature snippets. So you have search voice, with your assistant, and you're going to be receiving the source of information from that feature snippet. And also 11% of them are coming from people also as result. And you may say, okay, this sounds like voice search results, right? It is. So companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and others are investing a lot of money on voice search these days. Why is that? So there is this phrase from the Sustainability Reporting Guidelines talking about brand impact. Let me read it for you. The future of brand impact lies in turning problems into solutions. Feature snippets sounds like, right? Making purposeful partnerships and creating businesses built upon the foundation of social good. So helping people with their needs. That's the main purpose of feature snippets, and also people also as results. And in a nutshell, in the next couple of years, half of marketers are cutting their budgets for payment ads. That's the thing, because we have 0 clicks everywhere. Ads are working, but they are not working the way that they supposed to be, because we have Amazon. So in the next 2 or 3 years, Amazon will take a large part of the traditional advertising budget, specifically for products. In the next 3 years or more, part of their advertising budget will be redirected to investment related to voice searches to increase brand impact for every single company that are working on that technology today, and they are measuring brand impact, of course. So basically, that's it all from me, setting up the conversation today. Kate, I'm coming back with you.
Thanks, Fernando. It's very interesting to get that kind of whistle-stop tour through how Google builds into brand connections with people, but also that kind of growing influence on voice and how that's going to be changing people's relationships and how they structure their ad campaigns. So from that, we'll hand over to Chelsey of Saga to talk about her first-hand experience. Chelsey.
Hopefully this shares. Always an awkward moment, isn't it, trying to get your screen to share? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsey Gibbons. I'm Digital Analytics Lead at Saga, where I work in the group digital team, and we specialise in analytics and optimisation. So thank you for having me today. If you don't know who Saga are a specialist provider of holidays, cruise and financial services to the UK over 50s market. We've been doing that for almost 70 years now. And today I'm going to take you through a short case study looking at the Not Going Out Club. So this was a brand campaign we created and ran during the COVID lockdown, and I'm going to take you through the activity and communications we undertook and how we went about measuring, refining and reporting on the success and progress of the club. So without further ado, let's rewind to March 2020. So at the time we were sitting in the office and the situation was rapidly changing around us, and it kind of became pretty apparent pretty quickly that we were going to be faced with 2 real big challenges. So the first one was our customers. So they're in the over 50s market, and they are continuing to be, but at the time we're seeing to be the most vulnerable to this virus, and therefore there was the potential to have an increased and a prolonged need to isolate. They wouldn't be interacting with other people or family potentially for a really long time. Therefore, we felt that we were uniquely placed to support our customers during this time, and we had a chance to step up and try and keep them entertained, connected and engaged during this trying period. But of course, there's always a business need. We are a travel and holidays company from one side, so we anticipated there would undoubtedly be disruption. But we also run a membership or customer benefits program, and many of our partners would also face disruption. So we kind of came up with we were posed with the question, how could we keep our customers engaged with the brand, but also support the brand and the business during this time? So we had a SWAT team of staff come together from magazine, brand, digital, and from a few of the business units. And we came up with the Not Going Out Club with a pretty clear objective of maintaining engagement with the brand and purely reaching as many of our target market as possible with content that they would want during the COVID lockdown. So new channels, lots of content and lots of learning. To say we learned a lot, we did. So how did we drive this campaign? We initially started out with the idea of a bespoke landing page, creating content from across Saga and our carefully selected partners. And the idea was to create a place for our customers to access all of our best content from the magazine, cruises, holidays, insurance, all in one convenient place. The landing page featured interest-specific articles, content and recipes from our partners, games and puzzles to keep the mind active, as well as video and audio content from fitness to flower arranging to chocolate making. You name it, I think we covered it. We also opened up our Saga Edit app, which unfortunately, but also fortunately, was launched just a month before we went into lockdown. So we opened up our app to anyone who wanted to download it, and we put in there all the best content from our magazine editorial team. We also harnessed the email customer database to reach out directly to our customers. We knew we wouldn't be emailing them about buying products at that time, and a lot of our communications would be around customer servicing at that point. But we also knew that we could reach out to them with something a bit more different and interesting. So we let them know what content we were creating, and at the time what we were expecting over the coming weeks, and then it turned into months. So after we created the page, we quickly followed up the website experience with extensive activity across social channels. We created Facebook videos from Julie Peasgood, John Sargent, Dame Kelly Holmes, were just a few of the names who joined us throughout the duration of the time we ran the Not Going Out Club. We also reached out to our magazine subscriber base who are particularly loyal to the brand, and created regular blog posts from our wonderful editor who kept our audience up to date on the latest trends and going-ons, ways of keeping active, both mentally and physically throughout these unprecedented times. We also jumped feet first into the world of rich media, and we launched our Saga podcast, where we explored current and relevant topics with a host of celebrities that resonated with our target audience, and it proved extremely popular throughout those months. So by the time the club was wrapped up, we were producing bespoke content for each channel, improved our tracking and reporting, tapped into press and media coverage with the celebrities we worked with, all to increase our exposure and reach out to our customers and our target market. So that's what the club was. So how did we measure success, and how did we refine where we needed to improve? So if I touch on measurement for a second, we had a pretty clear objective. It was to maintain engagement with the brand and reach as many of our customers or target market as possible. So there was a lot of excitement around the campaign and a lot of interest internally about what we were doing. So when we set up the campaign, we had a real suite of metrics, and we put them all into one dashboard, which allowed us to track from a range of data sources. And this was really the first time we started to put together metrics from all different sources. So we had web analytics, social data, and podcasts, for example. But we always try to wrap them up and align them back to engagement and reach. So though we included end of funnel metrics, we very much placed our focus on upper funnel metrics such as reach, impressions, and engagement. But we also included kind of peripheral metrics that we hadn't really paid attention to before, I guess, which is things like average page views per visit, rate of returning visitor, time on site, as other indicators of success. But we also kept the reporting on the progress in regular intervals. So we had kind of very regular team meetings on what we were doing almost daily at the kickoff. And we democratized the data amongst the team and the wider business, enabling us to really refine what we were doing. So when we were refining our data, we collaborated really closely with our media agency, and to be honest, lent on them a lot to help us articulate what success looked like. We knew what it looked like from our perspective, but we were reaching out into mediums that we hadn't gone into before. So we then looked at what was good looking like, how could we benchmark against other campaigns and against industry standards. The agency we worked with also helped us to present what that would look like back to our internal stakeholders, especially the board, so that we continue to maintain buy-in from our business. Because it was a collaborative process from the start, we really delved into how we would track this campaign. So we have external tracking codes that come in, but we also then used internal tracking. So we knew exactly what the customer journey was once they hit our website. But we also tapped into sources from social, but also allowed the agency to tap into our analytics portal to help them with targeting and reach strategies on our social platforms. We updated and circulated the content on a regular basis on the website, and we used social data and SEO data to understand what our audiences were searching for at the time. We're really lucky we have the Saga Magazine website, which is a huge portal of data, a huge portal of content, which when we knew people were searching how to get your prescription online or how do you make WhatsApp calls, we were able to tap into that and pull that content out and circulate it on social, but also bring it to the forefront on the Not Going Out Club page. And we really let the data point us in the right direction at all times. Our overarching dashboard allowed us to deep dive each channel. So not only were we looking at the campaign at a high level, we were looking at it at each individual channel, and we could spot any risks or opportunities early and proactively refine our path, both with the internal team, but with the support of our agency. It also helped us to understand the halo effect of one metric on another. Within the dashboard, for example, we could see when we saw increases or spikes in podcast subscriber listeners, we were also then seeing that translated into positive sentiment scores towards the brand. And then finally, Optimise. So sharing our data with our agencies, but across the teams within Saga, allowed us to optimize our media spend, the channel distribution, the timing of our communications, the content, the talent we acquired, and the content we shared. We adopted a fast-paced test and learn approach where we critically analysed the key metrics and continuously improved our course of action. We also used the agency collaboration and internal team knowledge to help us create content and communications specifically to various target markets. So we found that our over 70s were searching or looking for content very different to our kind of 50 to 70, and we also had different talent. So for example, Dame Kelly Holmes, she produced content both for our younger audiences or our fit audiences, and then our older audiences. So we really started to refine and optimize that content we were pushing out. For example, we started to see, as we ramped up PR communications, we started to see non-ID traffic come into the website, showing that more people were finding us outside of our customer base and our traditional communication channels. But not only did we look at quantitative data, we also harnessed qualitative data sources, so gathering verbatim feedback from our website, from across social, from across our audiences, allowed us to really understand the why behind the numbers. And again, that allowed us to really reinforce what the data was telling us and pushing us in the right direction. So finally, we had two clear objectives of engagement and reach, and that gave us a really clear starting point from the beginning when we looked at our measurement and metrics for the Not Going Out Club. We also, where we could, implemented rigorous tracking in the digital space in order to fully understand how each channel was performing, but also set realistic expectations. We did put spend behind some of it, but it also allowed us to see where we did spend, what were we getting out of the back of that spend. We worked really closely with the analysts on both sides from the beginning. It was a real collaborative process. They were asking us what we defined engagement as, and then we would ask them, okay, what as an industry do you define engagement as? We relied on the agency analysts to help us through new territory. I'd personally never done a podcast before. The business had never done a podcast before. So they helped us set that up, understand the analytics behind it, and set in industry benchmarkers. So we could tell our business how well we were doing, not just ourselves, but we were doing well, as well as sharing our own internal metrics to help the agency recommend how we could progress. So when they understood what we were trying to achieve, they were able to point us in the right direction. I said we not just rely on end of funnel metrics, though we saw positive movement in traditional conversion metrics, i.e. sales and bookings, we were able to show that these movements were a result of improving our top funnel metrics such as reach and engagement. And interestingly, over half of the traffic that came to the Not Going Out Club site or page went on to view another site section on the website. And because of the tracking, we were able to see directly end of funnel metrics improving from those sources. And finally, I think we did a good job, not only for ourselves, but for our customers and our wider market. Following increased on social media channels, we had some wonderful feedback from those who engaged with the campaign. And we've really taken these learnings forward into future strategies. We're making sure that quality content is at the heart of our brand and customer experience, but that we also continue to work collaboratively with our agencies. They understand the metrics that we're trying to move towards, and they're helping us get there. And we had some really, as I said, some really nice feedback. So there's a couple of quotes here that we had from customers. So I'm very sad the Not Going Out Club is coming to an end. I've enjoyed it very much, especially Julie Pearsgood and Nina Masowski. I could never say her name. And then, well done, Saga. How to beat the doom and gloom was the aim. You and your array of stars achieved that, and then some. This is not the end. Let's make it a pause so we can get to picking up this soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Chelsey. That was a really good overview of I think very, very timely and clearly quite agile campaign that you put together, reactive to your customer needs. I'm very interested in picking up, and we've had our first question through on the chat, which I'm delighted about, which I'll get onto in just a second. But I'm really interested in what you mentioned quite early on about peripheral metrics. And how there was that serendipity element of there was more than you were originally kind of measuring that actually came through. How did you share that a little bit more internally? And do you think those are going to become less peripheral and more central to your campaigns kind of moving forward now you've seen those kind of knock-on effects?
Yeah, you can still hear me. Sort of mute myself. Yeah, definitely. I think we definitely put more metrics into the limelight. We were very careful not to have kind of analysis paralysis, as some people say. But I think there's more of a recognition that if you improve your upper funnel metrics, you will definitely see that translate through to the end. And it was definitely a communication piece at first. I don't think anyone knew what rate of return of visitor was. But it's talking to your stakeholders internally and saying, this is what it means and this is why it's good. So, yeah.
So the question that we've had in from Emma on the chat was, which reporting tools did you use for the master dashboard?
Oh, old school.
Over the issue.
Excel. Nothing pretty. I think it was because internally we have things like Tableau, but and we use Adobe Analytics as our analytics, our website analytics reporting tool. But we were pulling it from everywhere, and we had to do it quickly. And to be honest, it's easier to do it in Excel. And a lot of the tools had API straight to Excel. So it was literally a case of just updating it. And to be honest, as well, a lot of we were giving this stuff to the C-suite, and a lot of them don't have access to those tools. They don't have access to Tableau. They want a bit of a PDF and have those high-level figures. So yeah, good old Excel for this.
As long as it's the most up-to-date version and you have the right number of rankings. Well, that's the last time I'm going to reference any kind of potential kind of government knock-on. I promise. So we have a couple more questions come in, and I might broaden it out a little bit because I think there's something we should dig into before we move on to our two Jesses part of the agenda. So there's a question here about it all starting off with a lovely idea. Was there any assessment of the potential impact of the creative idea at the start?
No, it was let's get it done situation. Very much it was the right thing to do at the right time. Normally when you do campaigns, you can tend to overthink it slightly, and I think there was just this real feeling that this was definitely the right thing to do. It was the right thing for our customers, and we were almost given the freedom by our C-suite that was, as long as you're doing it for the customers and those customer metrics, which was reach and engagement, are improving, then you're good to go. And that's kind of what we aligned ourselves to, and it was a happy coincidence that we pushed up more conversion metrics as well.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there was a real need, I think, and that comes from understanding your audience and being able to pivot such a ranging campaign as well. We've got another question as well from Janine, just about how successful was the PR when the media agenda was so packed. So you mentioned, and I think we'll probably circle back to this later, a lot of collaboration with your media agency and the interplay between kind of understanding what good looked like in benchmarks on approaches that you hadn't really tried so much before. Do you have sight on the PR side of that campaign as well, and how was that benchmarked and measured?
So I guess there was almost an element of get as in many places as possible, which was quite nice. But I definitely, to be honest, I wasn't very close to kind of actually booking in the PR and working with that, but it was kind of then going, we've put this article in, we would then see kind of natural search creep up, or we'd see, as I said, like customers that traditionally our site is very heavily ID'd customers. You know, we were over the 80% sometimes of customers that are coming on the website. And actually we always flipped that the other way around. So you could definitely see the impact of getting out there and getting to people that didn't know who the brand was, and getting out there and talking to the people that wouldn't necessarily think, oh, I'll go to Saga. So yeah, and then when we were feeding that back to the agency, they were like, that's good. They're all good things. So yeah, definitely. And we were putting ourselves in places we've never really been before as well. So yeah, and for the right reasons, which is always good.
And I suppose just a question for you and Fernando, probably before we move on to just the second half of our agenda, which is, obviously there were so many businesses very quickly when the pandemic started to bite, who had to pivot to digital in ways that they really hadn't tried before. Is it either of your experiences, do you think, that you saw people demanding certain types of metrics or needing information on certain kinds of analysis that maybe they hadn't been kind of looking to before? And do you see those kinds of trends continuing?
So from our perspective, I think we learnt on digital a hell of a lot more. And I think we were in a really good place. We knew it had a good place in the marketing mix, and we have some of the best in, well, personally, I think we've got the best in class tools to track and monitor and measure that. And I think it was a case of it really came into optimizing it, making sure it really worked for our customers, instead of it being something that we had to do. It was something that we should and need and is the right thing for the customer.
Fernando, maybe a question for you, because you have that more kind of global scope in terms of all the countries that you're acting in. You'll have seen the pandemic roll out across the world. Have there been any kind of real needs on certain types of measurement that you've seen, or demands or requests that you've seen coming in from people trying to very rapidly learn about how they can get to grips with their digital measurement and where they should be focusing their time to engage with people as they shift online?
Yes, lately, most of the e-commerces, because they are in a really good position these days, they're looking ways to find out how to improve their conversion rates, how they can go further to analyze what is happening also with direct traffic. In direct traffic, we have several things, and some of the things that are included there are unknown. We don't know how people are getting to our websites, but if we are measuring direct traffic, as many companies, for example, I was talking with the guys from Zalando, those guys, they have in each marketing team, they have an analytical person that is measuring all the efforts. They have analytical people in their social media team. So they were implementing one analytical person even in the sales team. So measuring all the parts, just to understand what is the situation overall and how they can improve it. I think that was a really great idea. We, as a company, we want to have that. We included in our content marketing team different analytical people that are measuring several stuff around the content that we are publishing.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I think we've we'll probably come back to digital and the rapid learnings to digital kind of later on at the discussion after the second half of our presentations, for want of a better word. But we'll move on now to Jess Hargreaves of Pretty Green, who's going to talk to us more about kind of bringing things a bit closer to the PRCA heartland of PR and how we can set new measurement criteria in place. Jess.
Hi, thank you. Okay, I'll just share my screen just to give you a few pictures as I talk. Let me just get onto that. So I'm just going to go through 3 areas, which is why I'm here today, and why we know PR works, and just a quick brief discussion about the AMEC framework. Okay. So like Kat said, I'm the MD of Pretty Green and the producers. So we focus on creative driving effectiveness, and we talk a lot about how we can create PR experience, influencer less ordinary in terms of getting results. But I think it kind of taking a step back, Pretty Green is actually a pound note, so that is, you know, right at the heart of what we do, and quite a few of us have worked both brand and agency side, so all the time it's great to do a brilliant creative campaign, but it's just, you always want to know, have I actually driven any measure of success? Has it actually made an impact? Have I actually changed behavior? Because if you change behavior for a brand, you're ultimately going to drive sort of a hard measure of ROI. So as one of the reasons you guys we've been talking is also to do with the other pieces of work that I've done, and I've previously chaired the Experiential Council for the IPM, and I think it's really useful to look at how other channels that are sort of slightly non-traditional are also looking at how do you measure effectiveness, how do we prove our worth, or, you know, what does good look like. So this has been a really interesting piece of work, which I've been working on for about 4 years, and what it's come through is, again, a bit like this group today, and I guess the participants, is sort of talking amongst ourselves, knowing that as agencies and brands, we're all measuring, we've all got our own little dashboards, we've all got our own little tools, and actually we're all trying to get to the same place, but it is a little bit like marking your own homework, and therefore you haven't quite got the benchmarks, you don't know what good looks like. So we got together, and sort of at the last piece of work we did, we had over 100 case studies, 40 brands, and it was really about standardizing some sort of measurement model. And that's what I think is quite interesting to look at, and to see whether that's something that can be done across numbers of channels. And I'll come on to the IPA in a minute and how they've done this. So we've just done a model where we're looking at people pre-events. You're then taking information from them at the event, and then you're following up with them 4 to 6 weeks post, maybe 3 months, 9 months, because, you know, if you're trying to measure the propensity to purchase for a chocolate bar versus a car, it's a very different decision process. So a car might take sort of 9 to 18 months, even longer, before you actually make that decision. But a lot of what we've been doing is then looking at how do you actually measure, you know, have a brand affinity measure that makes sense to that industry, to that channel, and looks at the relevancy, association, accessibility, value and expectation of that brand that you're targeting with, but then also using, you know, scores like NPS that are already out there, but just specifically looking at that from an experiential point of view, and then ultimately trying to prove some sort of ROI, because again, you've got to make sure at the end of the day that you do know whether, even if it's a slightly softer measure that you've changed behavior, ultimately that is going to drive to some sort of ROI. So that's the sort of that effectiveness measurement model, and it's by no means perfect, and there's still a lot of work to do, but that's what I think is really interesting about trying to push forward in industry groups and seeing whether you can just push and get some of these sorts of results. And this initially was also founded from some work from the IPA, and they've done some really interesting work which actually proves that PR does work. It's just whether we actually sort of sometimes we're highly critical and think that everybody else, every other channel is scoring really well. So there's some work that we'd also done, and I'm sure a lot of you know about Binet and Field and the work that they've done. So, you know, with the IPA, they've done some analysis, 996 case studies over 30 years, 700 brands, 83 categories, and they've really looked at what in marketing is going to measure effectiveness in terms of hard business terms, and in terms of what is it that's going to drive long-term or short-term effectiveness, and what is it that's going to, and a lot of what their work has done is talked about how emotion drives effectiveness. So they've been working with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute for Marketing Science, which absolutely measures behavior, how people feel, and there's sort of an immense amount of work into marketing. And so all of this work that the IPA have done with Binet and Field has also got some work in PR. There's some really, really good hard facts that they've managed to prove that PR is also a really strong channel. So they pulled together from all of these case studies, looking at sort of the sort of activation effects of different channels. And one of the things that they found here, which is in this graph, you've got all sorts of different channels, is that PR is one of the strongest brand building channels. It's an emotional driver with long-term brand effectiveness. You see this here in terms of, if you're looking at a really sort of something that's going to have just a hard activation effect, then inserts, direct response TV, SMS messaging, sales promotion. But right on the other side, you've got sponsorship, you've got PR, you've got some out of home, and TV, yes, if you've got your big Christmas John Lewis ad and all the rest, those are those emotional drivers. And that's where PR has got a really, really interesting place, which we know because you could spend sort of 5 minutes reading a whole article that is actually a PR piece, or looking at something that an influencer's done, and that is much more of a peer-to-peer effectiveness piece of work. So I think that's really, really interesting, because you're looking at sort of the pull versus the push, which is sort of in that sort of direct response area. So this is a sort of a piece that it was almost taking a step back from and reminding ourselves that, you know, PR actually can deliver, but it's also been really clear about when you do or don't bring in PR. And also some of the other pieces of work that they did was they found that, you know, they could prove that PR isn't just a nice to have, that it really, adding PR significantly amplifies the business effects of a campaign. So the effect of adding owned was a sort of an additional 13% to your impact. And it's not to say get rid of your brand website, because obviously it's really important, but it's actually shown that the effect of earned was at another 26%. So it's just knowing that, you know, every channel, every part of a campaign makes a difference. And I think the reason why I'm really interested in looking at PR on all channels is just looking at the effects of each channel, that I really don't think that one thing tends to drive success. It tends to be a mix of all of these. Which brings me to my third point very swiftly, which is why the AMEC framework. And this is where I think as an agency, we're doing so much where we're really trying to push the AMEC framework, because it really neatly brings in paid, earned, shared, owned channels. It really, if you use that sort of a framework, and I think Chelsey just referred before to using a framework as well with Saga, regardless, it's just about integrating your channels, realizing as long as you're all sharing the same objectives, and then you're looking at all of the outputs, the outtakes, and actually realizing how they're all crossing over, then that's where the strength comes in to measure the impact. So I think that's just, from my point of view, is just actually having a framework, which I think this AMEC framework has been really, really helpful to our business, certainly over the past year or so, where we've really started to embrace that and then allow people to look at what different areas of a campaign to come in. So that's my quick summary into sort of why I'm here and why I'm interested in measurement, and why I think PR is a channel worth measuring that delivers impacts.
That was great. Thanks very much, Jess. I can see how I think the incremental value of PR slide, I could pretty much hear everybody printing screen on that one and trying to integrate that into conversations with clients kind of moving forward. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure when we'll come back to the panel discussion at the end, the issue definitely of collaboration and understanding how different channels work together is definitely going to come up. So thank you very much for that. And then last but definitely not least, we have our second Jess of the day, Jess Levy from Shark Ninja. Jess, over to you.
Hi everybody. So I'm going to talk, I haven't got any slides, so apologies for that. I'm going to talk for a little bit about measurement from a different angle. So really looking at it from before you start your campaign, and looking at how you can measure the success of a campaign through the engagement of your customer. But just before I sort of launch into that, I just wanted to say that probably, firstly, I have a deep distrust of most agency measurement tools. And so that's probably why I laser focus on ensuring that a campaign is optimized for success before I even launch it. No agency is ever going to tell you that your campaign has been a disaster. And ultimately, I always, I'm always a little bit skeptical about, how data is collected and reported. But that maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that way. I think that before the era of big data, marketing decisions were mainly driven by insights and gut instincts, and while the only measures of performance were KPIs and profit. Whereas today's digital data-driven landscape really allows to efficiently test hypotheses at a low cost. In my view, it's a bit like having R2D2 run your marketing campaign. So I tend to go for something in the middle, trust your gut and be open to trying different things. So in terms of engaging the customer, I also think there is a tendency from marketing directors to hand over their campaigns to agencies and say, go and make it really successful. And I actually think that there is a real onus on marketing directors to ensure that their campaigns have been tested for success before they've even launched them. And to that point, for me, it's about really knowing your customer. And when I say knowing your customer, I mean really talking to your customer. And I mean, visiting their homes, understanding their pain points related to your product or service, of course. What devices do they own? What media do they consume? What TV do they watch? What titles are they reading? What's important to them? What kind of messages resonate with them? And I think one of the things that I have really learned through my time at SharkNinja has been that testing out your products and messaging at every single point of engineering and every single point of changing your message is just absolutely it's priceless. And the amount of information you can take from your customer initially to actually ensure that your campaigns are successful, it's everything. And it's not a case of simply coming up with a concept, coming up with an idea, handing it over to creative agencies to make it happen, but it's actually about making those campaigns with your customer. And one of our ethos is always, that we want to delight our customers and garner those 5-star reviews. And the only way that you can do that isn't by, marketing jargon. It's by making sure that your product or your service or whatever it is that you're selling is resonating with that customer. And the only way you can do that is to go into their homes and test it with them and talk to them at every single touch point. So really, at the end of all of that, your go-to-market plan should really be very simple. It's just like filling in the specifics. You know what media they're looking at. You know what message is resonating. You know what their pain points are. You make sure that your product or your service is going to fulfill those pain points. You know exactly what kind of message they want to hear, and you basically put the jigsaw puzzle together. And so I just come back to the fact that it's all about the buyer at the end of the day. It's all about the customer. Customers will very quickly take to social media and tell you if they don't like your campaign or they don't think that something's right. And to even have invested huge amounts of money in your media without having rigorously tested a campaign first, in my view, is it's just. Why would you do that? Why on earth would you do that? So you know, I had a conversation with Paul and Kat and some of the other panelists the other day, and I said, at the end of the day, it's about using your common sense. But I think you can only really use your common sense. This is in relationship to measurement. I think you can only really use your common sense if you are 100% confident that your product and your message and your media that you are using to put your message out there is going to resonate with your customer. And then the you know, whatever an agency will tell you, whatever measurement tools that they have, fantastic, I welcome all of it. But if I know it's successful and I know it's resonating, then the rest is just you know, is a bit of a luxury.
Thank you very much for that, Jess. I think there's probably a lot for us to pick up in that discussion. I could practically hear the collective gasps of everybody kind of sitting on it when you said that mistrusting agency measurement from the past was kind of the MO. I think that's a really interesting point to pick up, and you're right, a lot of people are not incentivized to admit to failure even when we can learn by so doing. So we'll just quickly shift on to the free-for-all discussion at the end of our sessions. Please do keep the questions coming in. I know we've got one waiting in the woodwork, but first and foremost, we've got one from our illustrious chair of the Marcomms Council. So Paul, question for the group.
Well, first of all, thank you all for your contributions. Really interesting. And I can see I've been watching the participant numbers, and they've been consistent all the way through, which means we've created subjects and ideas for discussion that have resonated with people. I guess my question relates back to the first session we ran on proving your worth to the board, and Chelsey touched on the collaboration between agencies and clients, and sometimes perhaps that communication isn't as effective as it could be. My question is, in your experience group, how effective is that communication between the spoken objectives of the organization, the unspoken objectives of the board, your marketing objectives, and then the supply chain that can support you in meeting those objectives? Is that all aligned in the way that you would like it to be? Because certainly from my perspective, without that kind of alignment, we're not going to be able to measure the right things and deliver the right kinds of results. But is that an experience that people see that as a collegiate thing, or is the work to do there? Jess, let's start with you. Let's work up the agency side. We need to build the agency side back, Jess.
Oh, fair enough. I was going to say it's more of a client question. Well, I think, to be fair, as long as you've got we've talked before and it so depends on the brand, the way, how integrated you are in terms of how you're working in the first place, and whether, I guess, all the measurement tools there's just an agreement in terms of, is this a product that everybody or a brand that everybody's looking at that is going to serve the customer need, and that actually everybody believes in, and that we're going to, it's the integration probably from a measurement point of view. But I think I'd probably hand over to the brand guys, because, you know, an agency can give you so much, but unless you've got sort of somebody at the head of marketing who's willing to bring it all together and see the bigger picture and sort of fight the corner for, I guess, common sense, then that we're sort of a rung down in terms of knowing whether we can have that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's about the philosophy of measurement, isn't it? It's about saying, actually, are we all on the same page from the outset? Do we all understand everybody else's drivers, so that we are measuring the right things, rational and emotional, to make sure that everybody gets the results that they want to see?
Yeah, I think talking specifically around kind of the Not Going Out Club and what we did there, I think because it was an internal idea, I think we knew what we wanted from it. So then when we were partnering with our agencies, we could really articulate what we wanted from it. I think, you know, potentially if it's the other way around, it is the job of the agency to go, well, this is the campaign and this is what we think we would see at the back of it. Whereas I think from the Not Going Out Club and the experience I had there, we very much knew what we were doing it for, and we very much knew we had our 2 objectives, and we knew our data sources and what we could and couldn't track. So we were then turning to the agencies and the PR agencies around, what does good look like? Are we doing the right thing? Is this the sort of thing you would expect to see? So it's much more collaborative in that sense. It's probably different campaign to campaign, but I would say generally the agencies that we work with are integrated and aligned with what we're doing, and that makes it a very fruitful partnership. And you, as a brand, you can't just look to those guys and be like, oh, what we're supposed to do, because at the end of the day, it's your brand, so you need to drive what you want to do with it, is my opinion.
Marcel, was there anything that you wanted to add on that point? No? Okay. I think probably that does pick up on some other common discussions, though, and question to the group. In general, and certainly in my experience, going back, I shudder to say how many years, does kind of spring from media relations. And back in the bad old days, PR agencies definitely tended to be, I think, a lot more isolated from some of the other agencies that were working, just because there wasn't an awful lot of crossover. Clearly, that has changed an awful lot now. And with measurement really kind of shifting from, let's say, in the power and control of the agencies and as experts, much more into the hands of agency sides. Are there any challenges that really come up as part of that process that you've seen? And also, do you think that the many different agencies that are involved in these campaigns now, do you think they understand enough about each one's specific objectives and metrics, and actually how they can cross over and influence each other? Is there enough discussion and debate going on? Nobody wants to go first.
Well, I mean, from an agency point of view, I think the agencies do understand, because I think not most good agencies don't want to do work that isn't going to deliver something. But again, it's about setting up at the beginning and agreeing what good looks like and what the objectives are. And I think actually we've got so many tools now at our disposal. So you can overanalyze for sure, but I think if you're really clear in terms of what the framework is and what we're all trying to get to, it can make, you can test, you can learn, you can move on, but you've got to have that open dialogue. I think as soon as you start getting into silos and you're sort of being pitched against each other, then doesn't help anyone, because the best campaigns are those where you've just got central idea, everybody's working in their channel to work together to hopefully make it bigger than the sum of its parts, and that's when a good campaign works. But that requires sort of everybody to believe in that way of working.
Jess, I think this Jess L, this probably goes to you as well. Do you find it challenging sometimes to kind of not quite keep the agencies in line, but act as that focal point for them all, so that they understand how each of their campaigns can be overlaying on each other, and not, fighting in a bit of a turf war for who loves you the most?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, actually. And I think you can never do enough to pull people together and get people talking about what they're doing and how they're measuring, and what success actually looks like. And I think agencies actually don't tend to talk to one another. And if you're using multiple different touch points, from TV to PR to digital to all the out of home radio, actually, and you are working with multiple agencies, there is a tendency to, it's very easy to become siloed, actually, and to forget what one person's doing versus another. I mean, the overall success of a campaign should really hang on the level of engagement achieved with that target market, and how that engagement manifests itself in terms of conversion and ROI on the marketing investment. In my view, those sums are pretty straightforward. It doesn't really take a detective to work out what the brand sentiments are. I would also say, though, there is a fashion, or there was a fashion, so that the laser targeted media, particularly online, and I think in some instances that has actually been called out as being inefficient, and it simply doesn't always pay for advertisers to narrow their targets too much, and even if they are easier to measure actually. And I think that some agencies and and brands can get so focused on those laser targeting that you're actually missing out on a wider audience. And marketing people at the end of the day were like magpies. They want to rush into every new flashy thing, and it does create silos, and I don't think you can ever do enough to pull together with one coherent goal.
Fernando, I suppose a quick question for you, just based on that. We have had a question come in on the chat as well, so do keep sending them in. God, I sound like a kids TV presenter from the 80s. So Fernando, just on the digital metrics side of things, your presentation did kind of highlight let's say some of the intangible elements of how brands can connect through something just as simple as kind of Google search engine results and how that impacts on things. Do you think there is enough understanding, or do you see enough understanding from other disciplines outside of digital marketing per se of actually how that can feed into their campaigns? Do you know?
Well, actually, when I heard about the silos that agencies and internal teams and brands are having because of their straightforward way of measuring things, I believe that SEO, for example, as a discipline, is opening more these days, working with different other departments. Right now, they don't need only to be working on acquiring links or doing the keyword research. They need to be part of the whole funnel, working into the content creation and also the content promotion part. So those disciplines that were silos right now are multidisciplinary. Right now, to be a content creator, you need to be a little bit of SEO. You need to know about advertisement. You need to know about copywriting. In order to be a social media marketer, you need to be also a little bit of SEO. You need to pick the right words. So multidisciplinary roles for teams are something that a few years ago was something, okay, this is just too much work for one person, right? But having just a little knowledge and focusing on the right metrics is the way that we need to go. In our case, we are focusing on the metrics that are giving us the chance to escalate the process. That's why we are switching different ways of measuring, because we were working with KPIs, then with OKRs, and right now we have the North Stars. The company has one goal, and all the other teams, they need to be focusing on the main goals from the company, but they can have their own goals as well, but they need to be supporting at least 10% of the company's goal. So in this case, every team can be creating their own ways to measure things. The only requisite here is to be supporting the main goal.
I think that's a really good point about making sure that everybody is aligned to very simple, very clear objectives, but having their own ways of both getting there and kind of measuring that effectiveness. We've had a quick question just come in as well from Janine. Again, thank you. Second question. Jess H, I think this is for you. In terms of the AMEC framework, is there any provider out there that enables you to import results in that way? I'm guessing because the way it's been designed is quite elastic. There's not really any kind of set frameworks for actually how you measure against all of those goals.
No, I guess it depends whether in terms of inputting the results, you can end up on, I mean, we just tend to create a SharePoint document. So if you're literally talking about how to input it, so it's like a management summary. So there is a PowerPoint version of the AMEC model that you can download. In terms of what goes on behind the scenes, then yes, there's obviously, there's so many different ways to measure the outputs, the outcomes, the organizational impact pieces. So that's kind of all the bits behind the scenes. But if Janine means just a sharing document, then we would use that as a live document. So everybody, the brand from their own channel to the agencies, all have to insert into that sort of shared documents. It's like a live dashboard.
Okay, so kind of that comes back to shared knowledge, I think, and shared agency integration on actually how we're working together. I think what we've also heard, oh, Janine says thank you, so well done. We've also touched a little bit, I think, on intangibles and management of intangibles. It came up in Jess's discussion about common sense and making sure that you engage with the consumer. And I think when we talked, or the customer, sorry, when we talked earlier as well, we talked about measuring that kind of intangible emotional impact. Obviously the digital side of things can get there slightly with sentiment analysis, just measuring how conversations are going online. But can you see us getting anywhere closer to understanding and being able to quantify that kind of return on emotion? That's a big question.
That is a really big question. I guess this is something we're probably starting to look into. We're not just looking at the end of funnel anymore. As a business, I think we're very much more invested in more brand-led metrics and understanding what that does mean, and if we improve them, what is the benefit we see out of the back of them. I guess from a digital perspective, we're looking at ways that we can kind of understand things like, if a customer is struggling on the website, how can we first identify that and then actually give it a value. If they drop out at a certain point in the funnel, what is the value of that loss, and can we kind of plaster up the bucket of people falling out the funnel? That's kind of where we're at. Nothing clever or fancy at the moment, but I think it's definitely something that we should be looking at as an industry to work out if someone is satisfied with your product, or they come to your website satisfied because of anything that they've heard or seen of the brand before. How can you really activate that sentiment? Also, on the other hand, if they've had a really bad experience, how do you know that, and how can you kind of make sure that you don't upset them by trying to sell them the same product again?
And I think you can measure some of it from even just like using a customer sentiment analysis tool that which I guess Chelsey will be using a lot of, is that you can still measure what sort of audiences are starting to talk about, from if you use something like Infogy, we can start to look at those and start to really look into conversations. So I think you can do that. It's almost just knowing what the question is at the beginning, isn't it? Because like you say, we can just go off into so many different tangents and not know which bit is going to be useful to analyze, test, learn, and sort of develop from. So I think you can, and I think even from just the basics, from just really looking at classic traditional PR and just analyzing and actually looking at positive messaging and that sort of thing. And so I think you can take quite a lot. It's just knowing which tools to use.
Yes, Fernando, is there anything you want to add on that point?
Well, just basically right now, every single action that a user can have is measurable. We have the data. Also, if we are talking about sentiment analysis, this technology is going so far away right now. We can be measuring also irony, which is a really good thing to analyze. If someone is not really positive about a brand, we can say, okay, they are just working with irony, and that's perfectly, because that's one of the emotions that is pushing people to do something, in some cases positive or negative, but we wouldn't be able to analyze other aspects on their behavior. So human behavior right now, we can analyze some of the key moments when they are in the funnel. And I believe in the next couple of years, with all the data that we are gathering, so brands are gathering from users, we can anticipate or predict their needs. So we're going to be having a lot of new insightful moments in our beautiful industry.
We've had another question come in, and then I think we'll probably do one final wrap up, which will be a nice big metaphysical question again. So in all of your experiences, panel, do you see any real differences emerging in levels of sophistication in measurement between B2B and B2C? Is there one side that you think, or even, you know, gut feel tends to kind of crack things a bit more, or would you say that the learnings are constant on both sides?
From personal experience, I would say I used to work in the B2B space, and I definitely think B2C is, from my experience, far more sophisticated and taking it seriously. I guess the world that I used to be in, and well, to be fair, that was like 3.5 years ago, so it may have changed by now. The B2B world was very much, you know, get a salesperson in front of them, talk to them. Whereas I guess on the B2C side, it's very much around 360 customer view. Who is our customer? What do they want? What can we give them to better their experience? It's a different way of customer focus, I think. That's my experience of it, and I think there's more investment in the tools, especially what I've seen. You know, I think a B2C brand is really invested in the tool set around the customer, whereas my experience of B2B was, you know, kind of very basic in that sense. But it might be different from brand to brand. That's all I can say.
That looks like that was your experience as well. Jess, have you seen any of that? Sorry, Jess L.
I'd say that, I mean, I talk mostly from B2C experience and point of view, and that the levels of sophistication continue to grow with B2C, and the measurements of brand sentiments are all well and good and great and continue to evolve and be amazing. And but I still say you can't beat asking the customer yourself what and asking their level of engagement, looking them into their eyes and getting the answer. It's obviously, you know, using brand sentiment metrics is great from a quant point of view, and of course you've got to have it, but I'm just saying you've got to do both. I just would not just rely solely on metrics and numbers and figures and analysis to guide your campaigns. Use your instinct and talk to your customer.
Which probably brings me on quite nicely, thank you for that, to the final question. There are new tools that are developing every single day. There are new ways that people can be kind of tracking their customer data. Let's go round the panel. One last thing, gut feel, do you think we are ever going to be in danger of over measuring, and how can we kind of keep that course that Jess has just spoken to us of, you know, just engage with the customer as the North Star, how, you know, look them in the eyes, and you'll know what's working, and you can have that space to test and learn, I suppose, fail. So just round the group, do you think we're in danger of putting measurement first and getting bogged down in the numbers?
I'll go first. As an analyst, you'd be surprised to say that, yeah, I think we are over measuring. But as I said earlier, I think we're getting to a nice space where we do realise that kind of the actual customer feedback is just as important and gives you the why. It tells you why your metrics are going up and down, and that is invaluable. You know, listen to your customers, go into your call centers or your shops, or go out and, as much as you can in this time, speak to them and gather their feedback and find out why they like you, don't like you. And kind of my key takeaway is, yeah, we are over measuring. So when you do measure, really ask yourself why and how can you move that metric. And that's what we try to do every time we create a dashboard. Why are we putting this in there? And if we are putting it in there, what does it mean? What does it actually mean you're measuring? But also, what are you going to do to physically move that metric up or down? If you can't change it, it probably shouldn't be in there.
Do you want to join in?
Sorry, what's that?
Well, you can go.
Okay. I would say there is only a danger in over measuring if that's the only thing that you're doing. If you're just relying on analysis to create your content, then there is a great danger in that. I have paralysis just thinking about analysis, actually. I, collate the measurements that are obvious and not spun to suit your wished outcome. And my motto is it's always under your nose. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Jess H, do you agree with that, being at the focal point as you are of both PR and experiential, that intangible lived experience as well as the comms side of things?
Oh yeah, definitely. We do quite a lot we call grapevine, which is getting out, talk to people, but use data. But yeah, I'll get too bored. And you kind of know there's a few key pieces of insight and data that you just got to go with and make sure that works. And also it's the why, back to what Chelsey said as well. Just ask why. Why do we even need to do this? And if there's a different way of finding that out, but just make sure that you are measuring. That's the only thing. It's really easy to just go back to some real basics, like the PR industry is very, very guilty of, just looking at the OTS, just looking at what used to be AVE. If you're looking from the PRCA's point of view, that's not enough. That's definitely not enough. But there's a lot more, but just being clever and careful and questioning.
Fernando, is there anything you'd like to add on that point?
Yes, well, actually, my experience, I found out that we have these days 3 types of marketeers who are working with data. The first one are really obsessed with big data, how they can acquire more data, how to get API integration, different data sources, create beautiful dashboards. But if that data is not actionable, if they are not using that data to do something else, that's completely useless. The second type of marketers are really obsessed with the user, which is great, but they are not using the help of the first guys with the data. So you have user data and you have user comments, you have user feedback. So user feedback and user data are a really powerful tool.
Brilliant. So there you go. I think a nice summary to our collective perspectives on measurement today. Think about which marketer you want to be, and a plea for greater collaboration between silos. And I think on that note, Paul, our illustrious chair, over to you.
Thank you. Once again, thank you all to all of our panelists for a really, really insightful discussion. Thank you to Kat. She can now sleep, because I understand for the last 4 nights she's been worrying a little bit about how this is going to go, but I think she's done a fabulous job. Yeah, really, really interesting. Talk about brand sentiment. Kind of this thing feels to me a bit like the Zanussi brand promise, which was the appliance of science. And actually make sure that you give information, but you actually use your intellect to create insight. This, as I said, has been recorded and will be shared. Feel free to look at it again. Feel free to share with your colleagues. I'm sure they'll find it really useful as well. 2 pleas from us, I guess. One is that what would you like to see from the next webinar in terms of content? This is your group and it's for you. So by all means, email the PRCA and let us know what you would like to see next. And also, if any of you would be interested in joining Kat and I and the others on the exec to shape this group again, more than welcome. The more collegiate we can be, the more rounded we can be with our views, the better for all of us, I think. Thank you all again. Thank you all for joining, and I wish you a very good evening.